Hi everyone and welcome to the .NET Conference 2022. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm a program manager at the Microsoft Developer Division, overlooking the end-to-end experience for developer and how to integrate and interact with the low-code tooling we just heard about. So today I'm going to talk about how to easily create a web application using Microsoft PowerApps and interact with some of our with a .NET REST API as well. I know probably a lot of people haven't heard of Microsoft Power Platform or haven't even heard of Microsoft PowerApps. So before I'm going to jump right into our demo, I first kind of want to touch on some of the fundamentals and especially want to touch why as a developer I should be caring about this, or why is this super interesting for me and what I can actually do with the Microsoft Power Platform as well. So for this, I'm going to kind of show the total overview of the Microsoft Power Platform here and what it is. And basically, it's a subset of different tools and services, and all of these are using low-code tooling. So here you can see the Microsoft Power Platform. In total, it has 5 different subsets of tools. So we've heard about PowerApps, which is basically just a low-code way how to rapidly build web and mobile applications. We are talking about Power Automate, which is the low-code tooling for workflow automation, Power Virtual Agent, which is all about chatbots, Power Pages, which covers the topic of business and external websites, and then we have Power BI, which is the low-code tooling for data exploration or dashboards and reporting. So something I think is very important whenever we talk about the Microsoft Power Platform and about low-code, no-code, and the professional developers, I think something very important to mention here is everyone is welcome. Like, even though it's called no-code or low-code, we want to make sure everyone feels welcomed here. And everyone can use this tool because it's basically just another tool for you to be used however you are building your web applications. So something all of these low-code toolings do have in common is a very wide variety of different data connectors. Right now, we are counting more than 800 built-in custom connectors or built-in connectors, which I will be touching on later during my demo. And we also, something that all of these tools have in common is the low-code language, PowerFX. So these are some of the similarities and some of the things you can see all across this entire ecosystem of the Microsoft Power Platform here. So one of the questions I'm getting asked very often, why Microsoft Power Platform, or why should I even care about it? And I think, and we've also heard this in the talk before, is the challenge of keeping up with our business demand. Over the last couple of years, and it keeps continue to be showing this kind of statistic, is something like a so-called app gap challenge. So we are seeing a growing demand for applications, but at the same time, we are seeing not enough developers out there to meet those requirements. And if we look even more in the future, we can see this gap being bigger and bigger. So why not, for some use cases, go back or leverage the functionalities of the Microsoft Power Platform so we can leverage time efficiency and also extensibility. Time efficiency, and I think we all know it, we have a lot of items, a lot of tasks backed in our backlog here, and we probably don't have enough time for all of this to deliver and to think about it. Especially if we've just watched a lot of the sessions during the .NET Conference 2022, and we are probably already thinking about, well, how can I modernize some of my web APIs? How can I build in all of the new features we've just heard about? So there just isn't enough time. So maybe for some use cases, why not just rely on low-code tooling and using some of the capabilities of the Power Platform itself as well? Something also very important, and especially from a developer perspective, is the topic of extensibility. We want it to be as easy to integrate with, not just from a front-end perspective, but also from a back-end perspective. And this is where the Microsoft Power Platform has very great and easy ways to integrate and communicate with your .NET REST APIs, which I'm going to demonstrate in a bit here as well. So when to use low-code tooling? There are definitely a bunch of do's and don'ts. I kind of want to touch on some of the most important ones. Starting with the don'ts, or the things you should be mindful about, is not every application is suitable for low-code. It definitely depends on the use case, and it depends on the requirements you're seeing and how you want to build it. I, for example, also talked to a bunch of developers who keep telling me, hey, if I do, especially as a back-end engineer, if I do think about front-end development, I want to have the best front-end development experience I can have out there. So that's also a very suitable case. You should do whatever feels comfortable for you. But maybe in some cases, and especially thinking about time efficiency, you want to rely on some of those tools as well. Something we're also seeing is don't move your data. Especially with an API-first strategy or APIs are everywhere, we don't want to move our data. We just want to leverage our external databases, and we want to communicate and integrate with our APIs here as well. So what about the do's, or what do we want to empower? Is we want to enable API developers to focus on mission-critical solving problem business challenges here. You're the ones who are taking care of talking to our backend services, especially from an API perspective. You want to make it as secure as possible, and you want to expose those data endpoints to your maybe Power Platform users. So we want to enable you to focus on the mission-critical tasks here. We also want to empower API developers, and especially the ones who don't really care a lot about front-end, maybe use some of the local toolings out there to easily and quickly create an internal application, and you don't have to care too much about your front-end here as well. We also want to empower, and this probably is a more evolved step, how about so-called fusion collaborations here, or fusion developments, which basically means you're collaborating or working together with some of the business users and you as the developer, and you're together creating applications and you're just scaling your business impact here. So this means you're kind of evolving in the role as a teacher, as an educator here, and you're working together to meet those app gap challenges we've heard about before. So what you can basically see is APIs are everywhere, and we want to empower everyone to use them. And this is where you as the API developer come into place, and you can use this strategy to not just integrate with your Azure API management instance, but also from there to communicate to our local tooling, just like PowerApps. So now the question is, how can I get my web API into the Power Platform? And this is where the so-called custom connectors come into place. Custom connectors are basically just wrappers around a REST API that enables Power Platform users to communicate with your exposed web API. So if we think about different types or different web APIs in general, what we ideally, or what some of the best practices is hopefully adding them to an Azure API management instance, and from there easily create a so-called custom connector and expose your web APIs. Do I always need Azure API management in the middle? No, you don't. You also have the possibility to create custom connectors from within the portal. But especially thinking about that governance and security, it is one of the best practice way how to integrate and how to expose your web APIs and make Power Platform users communicate with your web APIs. So now let's look at the fun part of this session. Next, I'm going to show you a demo. I brought a very compelling use case with me. And the use case is, and generally, I want to show you how easy it is to build a web application using Microsoft PowerApps. And our use case is, we already have an entire architecture set up. We have a web API, we are showcasing a dashboard on a UI layer here. And the question is now, and you probably know this, sometimes somebody from the sales team comes towards you and is asking for, well, you know, this is great, we have set this up here, but I just need a tiny new requirement. And you know how it is, sometimes customers are calling, and I just need a very simple internal application where I can type in some of the parameters and just send it out and add it to all of the things we've already set up here. So in this use case, we don't want to rethink or re-architect the entire system. We want to leverage what we have already built. And in this use case, it would be our order service API. And we want to build on top of it a PowerApp as a front-end design. And we also want to use Power Automate to generate Teams notification. So yeah, let me jump back over to my demo for this. As I've mentioned, we already have our web API set up. Ideally, we've already added it to our Azure API management instance here. So what I typically do first is I'm going to check on, well, which APIs are already in here. Currently, we can see 2 different types of APIs. And if you remember our graph right here, the one we care about is the order service one. So what I usually do first is I'm going to test my web API within the portal just to make sure that it does work. For this, I'm going to go into my testing tab. I'm going to select the get product one, and I'm going to hit the send button. As you can see, it's loading. I'm getting a 200, and these are my parameters I can now work with. And remember our use case. Somebody from sales comes to me and was asking about, we need a different front end where I can just basically type in some parameters and add it to our existing database. So now that I know the web API is working in Azure API Management, I want to expose it to the Power Platform. For this, I'm going to switch over to my Power Platform tab, and we talked about those custom connectors. You can see from within the portal, you can easily create a so-called custom connector. So you just have to select which API you want to expose you to. You have to select the Power Platform environment you want to expose it to. In our use case, because we're still in the development phase, we want to expose it to the development phase here. And then we can just easily creating by hitting the button right here. So as soon as we have exposed our web API, if I switch back over to my Power Platform portal, under custom connectors, I can see the web API we just exposed. But remember, we talked about the entire Power Platform ecosystem. So we talked about PowerApps, but also we mentioned Power Automate, right? So because all of these tools, they work together, you can also find in the Power Automate environment the same custom connector or the same API you just exposed. So now if I want to edit it or if I want to check, because we know security and governance is very important, we want to see what is the authentication type for this web API. So for a user who wants to interact with it, how can people interact with it? The Microsoft Power Platform supports different types of authentication types. So for example, OAuth. In our use case, we have implemented or we are using API keys. So if I switch back over to my API management instance and under APIs, if I check different types of settings, I can see that here I have enabled subscriptions. And this means I always have to provide this API key before somebody on the Power Platform side can interact with this API. Especially for mission-critical data, you want to make the API call as secure as possible. And in this case, the provider, the user who wants to use it, does need to provide this API key. So I usually also test it within the portal itself as well. And if I hit the get operation or get product operation here, you can see I'm also getting a 200 and all of the responses in my body. So now we talked about how easy is it for me to actually create a Power App. So for this, I'm going to go to my Apps tab right here, and under Near App, I will choose the Canvas app because I want to integrate and communicate with my REST API. Conf test app. I'm going to find a name. Now I have the option to decide between different formats. So in my use case, I want to create a phone web application. I'm just going to select this one and hitting the Create button. And there you go. This is how you can get started with PowerApps in particular. And you can see right now I have a blank canvas. Some of you might be noticing it looks very similar to like PowerPoint or like Excel. And this is where the whole idea of low code comes in, is where business users who are typically used to PowerPoint, to Excel, they feel comfortable here. So it could be easy to include them in the journey of creating this kind of web application here as well. So yeah, this right now, the application looks very blank. I want to include something fun here, so I'm going to upload one of the medias. I have a fun .NET icon here that I can just going to put right here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger as well. So now I want to kind of have like a headline here, and you can see the insert button where you can select from different types of integration tools or different things you want to add to your Canvas app. This case, I need a text label, and my text this time is going to say .NET Conf test app. Let's make it a little bit bigger because I want to see this in a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it pop. So now we have our headline and we have like a fun little icon in here. How about if I have some kind of greeting for the people opening up the application? How about, hi, Julia? So as you can see, right now I hard-coded this, so it's a very static name in here. So what about if I want to make it more dynamic? What if somebody else is logging into this application and I want to display their name? So we talked about those so-called built-in connectors, right? And we saw these huge numbers of 800 plus. So what I can do within PowerApps, I can easily add one of these connectors to my app. And in our use case, under the Data tab, I want to add a connector called Office 365, which makes API calls to our MS Graph and retrieves the information from our Microsoft Identity Provider. And if I now call this connector, you can see I'm already getting a few suggestions, what I can do or what I want to do. In my use case, I want to make a My Profile call because I want to retrieve information and get information about the user who's logged into the Power Platform. So I'm going to call this one here. And in my use case, you can see I just did the dot here. And now I have a bunch of different informations I can display. So in my use case, I want to display the display name. So I'm going to hit this one here. And as you can see down here, it just changed. So I don't need this name here. And now it's a dynamic variable. So whoever is logging into the Power App, their display name will be displayed. So now we talked about how can I interact with my .NET REST API, right? So as a next step, I want to add a button because I want to make an API call. So let's add the button right here. I want to change the color because I want to make it purple. I'm going to change the name of it as well. Data. And now if I want to change some of the properties right here, what I'm going to do is first, again, I have to add my connector to the Power App. So I'm going to search for the custom connector we've seen before. Red dog, there you go. There you can see I'm adding it to my Power App. And now every time somebody hits this button, I want my information to be displayed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this API call. And again, just by simply referencing the custom connector's name, I'm gonna call my get product operation. And every time somebody hits this button, it will make the API call. So what about the responses? I need to save them anywhere, right? So before I'm gonna do this, I wanna save it in a so-called collection. So we have a function called clear_collect. I'm gonna just call my collection data API. And now I'm making the API call, basically saving my response data in my just created data collection. I also want to notify, there you go. I want to notify every time, good job. that something has happened. And when it's successful, I want this to be displayed. So let me show you how this looks like. If I play the play button, I'm going to get the data. I'm getting the notification. Good job. Got job. English is hard. So now it should be saved in my data collection, right? So I can check my data collection, look that I just created for my web application here. And here you can see these are the first 5 items in this collection. Just kind of as an example how this looks like, what are some of the column names, and now I can interact with this collection. So for this, I want to easily create one of those galleries. I'm going to search gallery here. I'm going to create a blank one. I don't like the layout, so I'm just going to switch up the layout here. And right now you can see it's actually using example data. So before I can interact or display any of this, I'm going to change my example data to my collection data here. And now I can edit some of the fields. I want to have the title being the product name. The subtitle, I want to make it my product ID. And you can see it changing in the back here as well. And the body in this case should be maybe the unit costs. So now you can see we use the Office 365 connector. We made an API call to get our data, and here you can see our gallery displaying the data we just got from our API call. So just imagine, it just took 10 minutes, right, to kind of simply set this up. How about if we include somebody from the business side, because they were the ones wanting to show and wanting to add something of this. So let's just imagine, I don't want to save it. Let's just imagine somebody else had set up already a Power App for you. So I'm going to edit this one here. It's a little bit more fancy. I'm not a designer, so maybe somebody from the business side had maybe a day or something had time to integrate and to make this Power App really nice and pretty. And this is one example how this could look like, right? If we look at our submission screen feed here, and I just kind of want to show you what you can do while submitting one of the orders is. You can not just make a post order call, so you're basically making an API call to post an order, but you can also send it via a Power Automate flow to your Teams application. So let me show you what this will look like. If I fill out these here, I'm going to select one of the products. I'm going to hit the Submit Order button. I'm going to switch back over to my dashboard because I want to see if this actually worked. Here you can see, okay, perfect. I got my order request here. I can see my dashboard being updated. And now I'm going to switch back over to Microsoft Teams because remember, we called a Power Automate flow saying that we send out a message here as well. And as you can see, I'm already getting an update here. And in my order submission channel, via an adaptive card, I just posted the new order submission based on the parameters we put in here. So thank you all for listening. If you want to learn more about this, feel free to get started. We have a bunch of QR codes here that helps you to get started with PowerApps, with Power Platform, with API management, and with using some of the low-code tooling here as well. And now I'm going to hand it back over to our moderators, John and Mariah.